Good morning, everyone. My name is Seth Goodstein. I'm the Queens County Regional Security Director for the Community Security Initiative. Thank you for joining us at Consultants Corner this morning. I'd like to now turn it over to one of our prized consultants, Ilya Romansky, who will introduce our topic from today and take it from there. Ilya?
Seth, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for taking precious hour of your time to spend with us and to join us. Today, I'll walk you through the process of bid management. We have talked about quite a few factors that lead us to this juncture. Today, I must admit, will be a slightly more dense presentation, and I welcome for you to take the time later on when this is recorded and posted up on our website to revisit it. Okay, the content is yours to review. Another reason why we're not doing polls or any other upfronts, we figured we have quite a few things to share with you. I'll try to use as plain a language that I can, so that it's so understandable. The Q&A session, I hope, will be lively. So we'll definitely allocate a little bit of time for that. But please start posting your questions in the chat, even now. We will monitor and then get back to it as we continue with the presentation. Towards the end of it, we'll do the Q&A. Let's get through the disclaimer. We post this all the time. Just be aware that obviously we're sharing with you results of our experience. We don't speak for any government agencies, those that are listed here and others. We do process information that they share. We try to interpret it. We try to offer advice that's aligned with the projects that we've handled, also advice that we've given to our clients. And so please just be aware that is the nature and the spirit of our presentations. Okay, so we have discussed the steps in the workflow that we've shared with you before. But for those who haven't seen it, obviously there's a sequence that you would follow, right? So there's phase one, which is you get the award. You would execute the documentation that's related to the award. You would then get the EHP prepared. For any of that material, please refer back to previous sessions that we have shared. They are posted on the website already under Consultants Corner on JCRC's website. You can revisit those recordings at your convenience, okay? Then we will talk about vendor identification. We did cover some of that before in our previous session. We also talked a little bit about advertising. Okay, today I'm going to skip that and speak more about managing vendors. Where would you look for them? What's entailed? To kind of continue that conversation, as well as walk you through what the bid management process entails. Okay, so we did discuss that it's impossible to find a vendor that's going to accommodate all of your requirements across different sections of the awarded grant and the scope of work that you need, right? So, a vendor that can do electronic system may not be able to do door hardware, and vice versa. Someone who does training that's covered by the grant may not have anything to do with either hardware or electronic security. But please be aware that you really have to spend the time to isolate the scopes. And of course, we will share with you, we've done last year, and we just want to make sure that we share it with you again, the scoring methodology for vendor selection. I know that we had a few questions before, so we want to get back to that and just give you a sample that we've used. And if I recall correctly, again, I could be wrong here, but we have been trying to actually add some of that documentation that could be useful with templates and so on our website. Okay, so please keep checking the website for any additional content. Similar steps are entailed in the hate crimes grant. And one thing that I would point to here is while the steps are the same, the MWBE component is quite significant, and a lot of our clients have shared with us how challenging it has been to find both competent and also properly certified MWBE providers. We wish that the situation could be a little easier, but here we are, a team of us that can help guide you in the right direction. We have seen some vendors and worked with some vendors who are certified. Well, we don't recommend specific vendors. Please let us know what challenges you're dealing with, and we'll be happy to offer assistance. Again, scoring methodology is pretty much the same once you clear the certification for MWBE. Okay. On the previous slides, there was a bright pink bubble among the steps, which is assignment of a project manager. I cannot repeat it enough to let you know that the clients that have been most successful and that have implemented systems and controls that have worked, that the community and the facilities can rely on, typically have a person who manages those projects from the very beginning, from once the grant has been awarded to the end of implementation. I understand that for some of you, it's a challenge, right? However, as much as you can, please share with us those challenges that where you're looking for project managers, or where maybe you have one, but maybe that person needs more guidance. We'll be happy to give you some advice on that. Obviously, we cannot take on project management for you to that deeper extent, but we'll be happy to share with you some ideas of how to overcome these challenges. Okay, we talked about the procurement process in previous slides, so I just want to guide you here that we will continue, and I'll share with you some additional content here. But very importantly, an RFP is not a single piece of paper. It's not a one-page document that you can simply send over to a vendor, or it's not a call or an ad that you place in a newspaper. An ad is in and of itself is just an ad. It's just a small blurb that says we're looking for vendors to do something, right? An RFP, request for proposal, is a very carefully put together set of documents that explain the scope of work and set out some rules for delivery of that work. Okay, think about a contract that you would want to sign with a vendor, right? So the RFP is part and parcel of that contract, where you can use that documentation to go back to vendors who are either in the middle of the implementation or at the end of implementation, to demonstrate to them that they may have missed some things, may not have followed the rules that you have set out. So please treat the request for proposal, which includes and should include your EHP. Please treat that as a set of information, a set of documents that you have to take some time to put together. And again, if you have questions about it, please do let us know. Above the workflow here, you'll see the template language for advertisement. We already covered that to some extent. And I think some of the template language is also available on JCRC's website. In addition, I'll share you a larger version of the bid scoring matrix, the example here. And again, it's not set in stone. You could certainly change some metrics here. However, this is something that we have already shared with some of the clients and something that's worked before. Much of this information I had shared with you previously. So the RFP package preparation is a process. The objective of it is to arrive at a package of documents that will have a cover letter. We did share with the community before, and in our previous recordings, you can go back to them and take a look. And I believe that there will be a sample of it posted on our website, what the RFP cover letter entails, but that in and of itself is just a cover letter. Hence the name. The rest of the information should incorporate your specific requirements, your scopes of work that you're hoping to seek proposals for. So once you have cleared all of these steps, you can begin identifying potential bidders. I have worked with a facility not so long ago, which advertisement didn't produce any results. Nobody called back. And then they started calling different contractors and basically saying, okay, come over to the site, take a look, which is in New York and nearby areas is a common practice for normal projects when you're spending your own money. For government projects, you need 3 bids, and those bids need to be administered in a way that is fair. When you're inviting vendors to arrive at your site without having shared with them what your RFP is, what your request for proposal documents are, right? It could create a lot of conflicts of interest and some complaints from the vendors who may say, well, you treated that vendor more fairly than you did our company, right? So therefore, I may not be inclined to either bid on the project or I'll go and launch a complaint. We've seen that happen in New York. Most of us do understand that New York is quite a litigious environment. And so people are a bit sensitive about these things. And so I implore you to carefully take a step back and put together a proper RFP and send it out to the vendors at the same time so that there is no misunderstanding, at which point you're sharing the RFP. Okay? As I said before, RFP package preparation will inevitably land you at different types of scopes. Okay, so you might need a contractor who will be helping you implement door hardware, which means that you'll have to solicit 3 bids from door hardware contractors. The same contractors will have nothing to do with window film. Those same contractors may have no understanding of how to implement electronic security systems. They have no idea how to do guarding, and they have no idea how to do training. They just know how to implement door hardware. They may be superb at it, but that's their limitation. So you'll have to carefully assess where that scope needs to be isolated, the sequence of that scope, because, for example, you can't install electronic security systems at a door that you're going to be replacing. So think about it. If you put access control on an existing door that you know you will replace, that means that extra work will have to be done after you replace the door because you were out of sequence. So typically you'd replace the door first, and then you would outfit it out with electronic security devices, right? There is a sequence of steps to everything. Now, what I just said, and that's why I prompted you that this is quite heavy and quite dense for a lot of folks. I'm not trying to make you take studious notes and remember every little step, okay? Whenever you feel like you're a little bit stuck, again, you can always revisit these videos. You can always take a look at the visual information we're sharing with you, the text that we're sharing with you, and also the recording of our conversation, right? And so I also want to offer you that there is a team of people at JCRC that are quite busy, but at the same time, they do take calls. They are able to guide you in the right direction. So we are available. That's the reason why the team exists. Okay. So when you're stuck, don't feel like that's it. It's insurmountable, right? Just please do reach out and or refer to the content that we have already published. As I said before, there is a project schedule, right? That's what's going to help you understand how each of the scopes will be delivered. Okay, so there will be a time for bid process. And I've had very funny stories where clients would go to vendors. They would, luckily for them, bring those vendors all together to the site. They're all doing the walkthrough. And then one of the vendors raises a hand and says, okay, so how soon do you need the proposal? And the client turns around, yeah, in 3 days. Okay, so needless to say, that's very unfair to the contractors. They're dealing with a large volume of different types of opportunities, right? So for them to turn around a proposal for something that could entail just quite a few intricate details, both technology or hardware, it typically takes somewhere between a week and 2 weeks at the very minimum. Okay, I've seen vendors who, after close to the deadline, after 2 weeks, would ask for an extension. Okay, so please, remember that if you give a vendor 3 days to turn around a proposal, you're going to get the quality that, or lack thereof, that is commensurate with the 3-day turnaround. The same goes for mobilization, the work that needs to happen on the outside of your facility, interior work, and handover. So all of that needs to be carefully calculated. And yes, I do understand that a lot of facilities have a lot of different programs and activities that are running at the same time. Okay, so yes, that does require a lot of coordination. Hence, my comment about having a project manager. Your request for proposal, at the very minimum, should contain these 3 documents. Cover letter, which we have, again, explained and covered in greater detail. The EHP, and we do have a separate webinar that discusses how to put together an EHP, where we actually did use the information from our friends at the government agencies that are funding. They have very specific rules for how to put together EHPs. And then we have also shared with you the document on the right, which is called Instructions to Bidders. Now, the rules here on the right side here, the general requirements for contractors, right? They could be updated and changed slightly from time to time, depending on the scope of the project. However, this sets out a very, how shall I say, useful rubric for you to follow. You will have a general description of the facility. You will give information about the general scope of work in total, what kind of work needs to be done around your facility. And then please take your time to read the rules, the general requirements for contractors. The reason why we say so is because we talk about things like licensing and certification and being approved to do work of different sorts, right? We also talk about the documentation that vendors must submit to you after they finish the job. Okay, I cannot tell you how many times I've gone to a facility after a project and I said, have you ever received any documentation that now depicts the updated conditions at your facility so that you can refer back to that set of documents? Where are my cameras? Where are my access control readers? Where are my new doors? Where's my new man trap, right? And no documentation exists. Okay. Sometimes I even see facilities that have made physical structural changes to their buildings and never put them on the drawings. Okay. How do you expect vendors to understand what's entailed at your facility before they even provide a proposal to you? You see what I'm saying? So these requirements set out the minimum standards that are very widely used in large projects in New York City and beyond, that how vendors need to behave and what kind of quality of work they need to deliver to you. Okay, and they're general enough to be used either in totality or updated based on slight modifications of scope. For example, if you're not doing windows, okay, fine. So you don't have to refer to window film. If you're not doing lighting, you can take a bullet about lighting out. You see what I'm saying? So, but in general, at the very minimum, top several bullets here are very, very important. Now, we did talk about last time, and I want to reiterate one more time here, that occasionally we see bids handled fairly well to the point where even the site meetings have happened. Bidders were invited to do a site walkthrough. You do have a fairly good schedule, to a fair schedule as well, to give bidders a little bit of time to prepare their proposals. But you're not collecting information from bidders in the unified format. So one bidder will send you a proposal that'll say, I will give you let's say, doors and window film and some access control for a total price of $150,000. They never break out line items. They don't tell you how much labor will cost. They don't tell you how much warranty will cost. It's a lump sum proposal, okay? Which is terrible. If you ever are provided with that type of proposal, decline it right away. Why? Because you don't know the pricing and whether that pricing is fair. I could be at a labor rate of $130 per hour for let's say, an installer, or I could pump it up to about $250, and you'll never know. Okay, so line item pricing can be solicited by use of bid forms. Okay, so you will not tolerate that the vendors will use their formats for proposing pricing and scope to you, but you will ask them to provide that information in a unified form, right? So when you collect that information, it's much easier to compare because the forms are all the same, okay? You don't have to use this example. You could use your own set of metrics, set of breakouts. If you've ever run any implementation projects, you probably already have seen how different proposals from individual vendors are and how challenging it is to level them. Additional information that can help you solicit bids from vendors, right? This is what you could give them to complete so that when they return it to you, you can, again, compare apples to apples, right? This is where they would itemize to you both the model numbers, the line item units, their pricing, and depending on the number of units, what the total will be. I was reviewing a bid just a couple of days ago, and I noticed, let's say the total is about $15,000. Let's say even $20,000, right? $5,000 or $6,000 was buried in cable alone. So my question to the installer was like, what are we doing here? Is there such a high chunk of money that's going to be paid just for cable? And so it turned out that he was running cable, which is called, again, a technical term for it is a home run, right? He was running cable from the very farthest part of a multi-story building continuously without any junction connections, continuously down to the ground floor or where it would connect. Of course, that increases the volume and the length of cable exponentially. That's not the right design. That's not how systems are typically installed. You typically have a breakup point at an individual floor, and then you run things down, if you need to, through what's called a riser, so that the cabling continues to run to a point where it finally connects with the proper equipment. So the point I'm trying to make is that vendor was proposing a fairly old design that would cost the client probably an extra $5,000. That was completely unnecessary. But if you get a lump sum proposal and you never see that broken out, then you'll never know. Again, this piece of information here is for you to review. It's for you to apply as you prepare your requests for proposal. Please notice, and I'll probably just share with you, point your attention to the right column here, right bullet list, general requirements for contractors, right? In many jurisdictions, if I'm looking at bullet 3, for example, all work and product functionality will be delivered in accordance with local fire code and requirements of other authorities having jurisdiction, okay, AHJ. The reason why this is included, right, is that particularly in New York City, a general installer is not allowed to terminate certain types of cables. And if they do it, it voids the warranty for a product if they're not a licensed electrician, or if they are not trained enough, if they're not authorized to do that type of work. Okay, and so there are some rules that are completely hidden away from your general operations. You would never know about them, right? But if that work is allowed to be done by a person who doesn't follow those rules, it voids the warranty of your product. And it also could cause challenges with the fire inspection next time around. It could also cause building inspection challenges. So what we recommend is that these particular requirements should be just delivered to the vendor so that they understand that they must follow those requirements, so that later on, if they haven't, and you do have an issue that authorities give you and say you need to address it, you would look back to that vendor and say, well, wait a second, you were supposed to have followed all these rules, so why haven't you? Okay, and so those are the simple rules to keep vendors honest and to reiterate those rules to them when you meet with them before they supply their proposals. Here's an interesting one. We do hear quite a bit about how do we find bidders? How do we pre-qualify them, right? So needless to say, those of you who already operate like kind of the run facility operations and deal with different types of suppliers, you probably know that either you would gather that information through your network, your peer facilities, maybe they've used the vendor and they did a good job. And so, kind of word of mouth is a good way of recognizing how credible and reliable a vendor is. Occasionally, though, you'll have comments right online. And this comment here was in relation to one of the facilities in Brooklyn and a subcontractor of a security systems integrator who didn't get paid. And the bill wasn't even much to talk about, to be honest with you. That's why I left the amount open here so you can see. Was $338. And they never got paid by the contractor who was working for the facility in Brooklyn, you see. And so they go online and they say, we'll never work with these guys again. They haven't paid our bills. We tried to reach out to them multiple times. And I hope that they don't treat their other customers like this, okay? And here, you can already see that this could be very useful as you evaluate different companies as your potential contractors. It's very useful also to take a look at personnel bios. How many years has a person been in the industry? What kind of projects did the person handle? So particularly for hardware and electronics in implementation, right? What kind of references you could look at? Is the company financially healthy? So at this point, it's no secret to the community. The way David Pollock introduces me, or most of the people on the team, is that they refer to my UN project when I worked and did security design for the UN campus in New York City. Well, the Capital Master Plan that was running all contractors for the UN, they were running the project, right? So during their tenure, 2 electrical firms in New York City went bankrupt, and they were delivering services to the UN. Okay, imagine the magnitude of a scandal, right? It was in the papers. There were multiple issues, right? Why did they go bankrupt? It's because they did not manage their liquidity very well. And at the same time, maybe they didn't get paid at the time that they were expecting, right? So you might have a company that doesn't show up one day in the middle of the project, right? You certainly don't want to be in that position. So another thing that I typically refer to is workmanship examples. How many times have I been at facilities where all I need to see is how the cabling is installed? I don't need to see anything else. I really don't need to see the brands of cameras. I don't need to see how the doors are installed, nothing. I just need to see how the cabling is installed at the facility. If it looks like a bunch of spaghetti that's barely hanging by a couple of screws connected to a wall, and if I see that how those cables are terminated in a security closet and it looks like a bowl of spaghetti, so it's a mush of cables, no labeling, forget labeling. Labeling would be too sophisticated for that type of installation, right? It basically just leave the cables hanging in whichever way, whichever direction possible. So it's a complete mess, right? And then a client tells me, look, we have a working video surveillance system. And my point is, it's not going to work for long because of the quality of workmanship. So contractors they understand when they're requested to provide examples of their workmanship, okay? And so you actually can pair it together with references, right? When you check for references, maybe you can get a photo from that same facility where they did installation, and then check how clean the job was, right? It doesn't take too much time. It's just, unfortunately, a lot of our clients, they don't even know that they can, and they have every right to ask about that. And like I said, last but not least, of course, is peer feedback. So, for example, another facility in Brooklyn, I was so impressed with the quality of installation and also the user experience, mind you, because the client was very impressed. The contractor really helped them understand how to use their video surveillance system and access control fairly well. So they felt very enabled. That was a rare experience for me. So, because typically contractors don't like staying and teaching clients how to use systems, which is another point you should take into consideration. And they said that we recommend that contractor to everybody because they did such a great job. I said, I agree with you. So it's a great example. You have a chance to speak with your peers and get their feedback about contractors who have done either a good job or maybe didn't deliver as well as they hoped. And so that could save you a lot of time and more importantly, headaches later on. One thing that we recommend is after you've sent out your RFPs, once you have understood that you've gathered a sufficient number of contractors who are interested in bidding on your project, again, based on individual scopes, right? So video surveillance and access control or technology contractors, then door hardware contractors, right? And then other providers, right? You want to discuss that scope with those contractors together in the same room. So that's why we recommend conducting a pre-bid meeting. So you do a walkthrough, you also do a review of all your conditions and requirements and what you need. There are inevitably conversations, well, if we do it this way, would that work for you? And contractors are very good at maybe even helping you save some money in a way that they can maximize the volume of implementation, but at the same time, make it more cost effective. They can come up with some ideas, and that helps everybody to kind of understand your requirements and what will then eventually go into the proposals, right? One thing that we always say to the contractors is that don't assume anything. These meetings are absolutely crucial to help them kind of get over that, so that later on they don't complain. Oh, I didn't hear you say this, or I didn't know you wanted this. No, so you come over, we'll talk to you, we'll tell you what the scope is. If you didn't understand something, here's your opportunity to ask us questions so we can help you understand what we're looking for. In these meetings also, I like how clients often talk about what kind of objectives they're trying to meet by implementing different security upgrades, okay? So it could be related to doors. So here's how we want the doors to work, right? So the contractors not only think that, okay, I just need to install it and walk away, but I need to set it up in such a way that it's useful based on clients' requirements. Same goes for technology, right? I've had a client who installed a burglar alarm system, right? I go to their site. It's a fairly new system. How's the system working? I ask. And he says to me, I don't use it. I'm like, why wouldn't you use it? It's fairly new. It covers, quite a bit of, of points at your facility, definitely the perimeter, right? And he says, nobody ever taught me. So they didn't set it up right. And when I turn it on, it just doesn't do what I need. So that is, again, where you could hold contractors' feet to the fire. That is why the projects are managed well. The final payment, whatever chunk that is, as you agree with them, is not given to them until you as a client can validate that they've done all the setup the way you need it. and they've trained you on the use of whatever it is that they implemented, and also that they have given you all the documentation that now depicts new conditions at your facility. So all of that stuff can be discussed with the vendors. Another thing that I typically recommend is to tell the vendors that we will not tolerate change orders. Now, a change order is simply a change of scope for which a contractor is entitled to charge you additional money above and beyond what was agreed and based on their original proposal. Unfortunately, contractors like using change orders to help justify things they forget. So I was talking to a contractor just a couple of days ago, and they're trying to sell to a client a video surveillance system. I said to them, I don't see in your proposal a video recorder. So I see cameras, I see cabling, I see licenses for cameras. I got that. Where is the video recorder? And then the engineer that was part of that meeting, he turns around and says, oh, there should have been one. So I understand, and I had to tell the contractor, I said, please don't expect that the client knows to pick up on that. It's not their responsibility. They don't do security design. They don't understand how a system is engineered, right? But if you tell them in these pre-bid meetings that you expect no change orders and that if you mess up, you own it, and so you have to provide a working system, a working solution, then at least it gives them the nudge to be a lot more thorough in the way that they propose to you. Okay, so that is one aspect of this that you should keep in mind. Now, as I said before, it's much easier to use your own bid forms. You can take either these examples and develop them further, or like these right now can literally be either given directly to the bidders you're dealing with, or simply modified a little bit based on the scopes you're trying to accommodate and give those same forms to those bidders. So they can insert the unit pricing and how much each of the components of their implementation will cost. Okay, so those are the two ones that have yellow bars at the top, right? The bid scoring matrix I'll cover in a minute, but those two forms are ready to use. Okay, together with the general contractor requirements, that could be very useful for you to do an apples to apples comparison. So the term here we use is called bid leveling. You could do bid leveling, obviously, in a qualitative manner, meaning that I had a contractor that showed up for a bid meeting, didn't take a single note, didn't write anything, right? Just was listening. It took maybe 1 or 2 photos and was simply listening. And we were there for like 2.5 hours. The rest of the contractors, and I was observing all this, right? The rest of the contractors are taking studious notes. Oh, okay, so in this location, we got to add this camera. Over here, we were adding access control. They're taking tons of photos. And I keep watching that guy, right? And so when the proposal came back, it was very obvious that one company did not know anything about the project because the gentleman they sent over just basically was, I don't know what he was doing. Either he was looking out the window or he chose not to pay attention, or maybe it wasn't of interest to their firm and he showed up just to maybe understand what these projects look like, right? But I kid you not, the proposal came back and I'm like, oh, this one gets declined right away. Okay, now, this is where it gets very useful. Even if you get a bad proposal, right? That is a proposal nonetheless. That's still one of the 3. So you can easily decline one of the 3 proposals right away and say, yeah, we solicited a proposal, so I met my requirement for 3. That proposal didn't even come close to meeting our needs because the person didn't listen to our requirements. So thank you very much. Maybe next time. And then you can focus on leveling the other 2 if they look relatively well put together, right? Especially if they're using proper bid forms. And you can do qualitative observations, right? Just based on behaviors of these people. If they don't get back to you, if they are rude, if they don't take time to take notes, if they don't ask questions during the bids, the bid meeting or pre-bid meetings, right? Of course, it's, all of those little factors, they will amount to poor performance at the end of the day, right? So you can also do quantitative analysis. Quantitative meaning that, for example, one bidder says, I'm going to give you 20 cameras, and the other says, I'm going to give you 25, but you asked for 19. Okay, so neither one is right. They didn't do right counts. So you can actually you could come back to them and say, no, the count is off. You're wrong. Okay. You can also do price analysis, right? And you could say your pricing is off. I don't understand why there's such a disparity, even if you were trying to propose to me similar systems. All of these things can be further vetted and followed up with the vendors. Okay. Just a simple list on the left here: completeness, accuracy, clarity, company information, experience, workmanship, unit prices, labor rates. All of those things can contribute to a prudent decision for award. Bid scoring matrix. So we've been using this particular example for a while, and I feel that this is a very good start. Obviously, this is not tailored to specific scopes or specific facilities and projects, right? Obviously, we would want you to take a look and see if you need to maybe modify something. Sometimes you would assign a weighted score. So because here you see, it's 1 to 5, but sometimes particular metrics might weigh more than others, right? For example, price, right? A lot of clients make choices based on price. That's great, but then who says that they're going to do a quality job? So this is for you to review. Based on all the forms and documents I showed you, I'd like you to consider that it's not so easy, and it shouldn't be, where you just simply make a call, you invite a couple of people to come over, there's no documentation being shared, and you basically say, go take a look at my facility and give me a proposal. Those proposals will never come back to be available to, for proper leveling, because they're all going to be in individual formats. One will be more lump sum oriented. The other one is going to be probably consisting of some unit prices and so on, but they're never going to be exactly easy to level. So I would suggest a slightly more careful analysis, having a project manager that can help you do all this stuff. And then you can get to the point of reviewing the bids and scoring them properly. Okay. Now we have about 15 minutes, let's say, give or take. I see the chat is lit up with quite a few questions. Seth, I'm having a technical issue where I cannot see the chat itself. Would you kindly help me read them out?
Absolutely. So let's start with the first one. Do you have an RFP template, I guess, that we could send out?
The RFP template is consistent of few documents. It's not just a single document, right? So we have already shared the RFP cover letter. You should already have your EHP. The bid forms we have given you here. You can take those. So it's more of a puzzle you have to put together. I'm sorry, I'm calling it that. I don't mean to complicate things, but it's not a single document. So for templates, I believe some of them will have them posted on our website. Please, for your region, reach out to your regional security manager at CSI. They will help guide you to the right set of documents. Another thing that we typically do is we actually ask you a few questions, because sometimes you may think you're ready to bid and we may actually have a different opinion. Okay, so that's why it's so important that you engage with us and ask us and share with us what you're trying to do, and then we'll be happy to share with you what advice we can offer based on our experience. Okay, next.
So next question, and just on a side and kind of a segue from that original question. Can you just define an EHP? It's a little bit one of our prior presentations, but someone just asked for the definition of what an EHP is.
Environmental and historic preservation. So this is a term that's been used both in architecture and also by the US government for historic facilities or facilities where projects are conducted that could impact the environment. For example, if you're installing a fence around your property, there could be some environmental concerns considering the materials you're going to be using. So the EHP basically demonstrates in visual format with annotations where and what kind of devices and upgrades you're going to be putting in. And so that EHP document is nothing but a PowerPoint slide deck with a lot of photos and annotations. And in previous webinars, we've given you what it might look like. That's what the EHP document is.
Okay, next question. Where do you place 2 CFR compliance in the NSGP process?
I might need to read that one more time. Can you
2 CFR compliance? That's new to me too. I haven't heard of that. So
I'll ask the community to not assume also that we know all the acronyms that you're using. Can you please, if whoever wrote this, can you please explain to us what 2 CFR is? It could be
procurement compliance.
Well, so it's very vaguely covered. by an SGP. So if you look at the materials that an SGP the agencies have shared, right? They cover what the compliance requirements are. So primarily they are for your facilities to comply with the grant rules, right, in order to be reimbursed. But they don't spend a whole lot of time talking about procurement compliance. That onus is primarily on the client facilities. So they don't tell you, make sure that these bidders are in good financial health. Nobody will tell you that except for forums like these. Nobody's going to tell you, oh, by the way, make sure that you've reviewed bios of the team that's going to be doing the implementation. They're not going to tell you that either. The government always tries to make sure that they have themselves covered, and they cover themselves by making your facility, your projects comply with their rules, rather than telling you how to apply to CFR to your project and to your vendors.
Okay, next question. Typically, what type of person develops an RFP? Does it have to be an architect? How could it be a layperson?
I know, and there are 3 question marks after that. So the grants offer you a budget to hire a management and administration consultant. That person would be best suited to put together an RFP. Now, I'll give you some qualities, some basic qualifications for what kind of knowledge this person should have. They should have knowledge of facilities procurement in general. So if they've ever procured any sort of facility services, they probably will be much better suited than a person who has never done that. That's number 1. 2, the person needs to know the particulars of, or general particulars, not the details, but the general particulars of security systems, video surveillance, access control, cabling. So they should also have the awareness of electrical systems, and they should understand how to implement door hardware. They should have basic awareness of what that is. Now, the bonus to you, those that are joining us today, is that we have done quite a bit of analysis and sharing with the community about all of those points. We have taken you last year, and those webinars are still available, right? We've talked about door hardware. We had specialist door hardware consultants come over and do webinars. We had discussions about electronic security systems and how they're designed. We spoke specifically about video surveillance, access control, what components and subcomponents those systems have. So what I recommend, and this is where basically kind of how we all operate, you'll only remember, if you don't go back to this content in the next 24 hours, you'll only remember about 10% of what I say. And I keep repeating myself all the time. I tell you, and I kid you not, you'll only remember 10% of what I say today. And that's the top number, maybe even 5, maybe nothing. You have to review of the content we offer. So after today, block half an hour and do a review of these videos, or this one video, right? You could double the speed of it. You'll hear me talking at twice the speed, no problem. But you can, review it one more time and take some notes and get prepared, because I kid you not, and that's why I don't like training that only happens once and never repeats itself, because that's not how our brains are functioning. So I'm sorry to tell you, but we can't hold your hand there. You have to do it on your own. You have to take notes. You have to study. That's how it is.
Have you found that organizations that have successfully used project managers have employed project managers with backgrounds in security or anything else? Second part of this question is, do you have any recommendations for where an agency can find a project manager to do projects like this?
So I'm not necessarily suggesting that you need to hire a person with specialized security knowledge. Even in the security industry, the number of those people I can count, I don't know. I'm not going to say on both my hands, but it's not a large number. It's not a high number. There are barely, there's some big engineering firms that have some people that know how to manage these projects, but they're outside of your financial capability because they charge a lot per hour. Okay, please reach out to your CSI regional manager and they will make recommendations for you. There are consultants available. CSI knows about them and they will put you in touch. But please also understand that that service is not free. You do get reimbursed for management and administration. You should carefully manage that budget. Sometimes that budget comes out of your capital budget. Sometimes there's not enough money to cover from the grant. However, the assistance is available. It's just Unfortunately, it's not widely available, but I would suggest that you speak with CSI.
How do you deal with potential bonding requirements in the RFP or not for construction contracts?
I would refer back to your municipal and local requirements for bonds. Typically, if I recall correctly, electricians must be bonded. If your organization has ever implemented anything IT or electrical, and you could look at the history of those projects, if there were bonds involved, I would suggest you repeat that. Okay, now I would tell you also that might disqualify some contractors who are already difficult to find from allowing to deliver services to you, because some of them are small and they may not have enough funding to purchase bonds. And so that means that they can do the job, but they won't be able to afford a bond. So I suggest you follow both requirements in your specific jurisdiction, as well as take a look at the history of your projects. And maybe it could be dependent on the total value of your project. For lower value projects, let's say if you're spending 20K, I would say just have a very good contract in place that makes sure that there are no change orders and that the turnkey solution is properly delivered. But that requires your own inspection. So you have to look after that project, right? So a bond may or may not be useful to you. However, as I said, some contractors just may not be able to offer one to you.
We wrote our RFP for front doors, but then we want to add back doors. Do we need to open bids again? Both are covered in the EHP already.
If they're both covered in the EHP and you just forgot an item, you can always amend. It's not a problem. You own the content of your RFP. So it's your decision. Even if you're very late in the game, even if you already did the best and final round, where you forgot something, just be kind to the contractors. They will get antsy. Okay, they also like to complain and they'll say, "Oh, you took so much of my time, whatever. You had to put it together." I understand. We made a mistake. We're trying to fix it, but we don't want to find that we're short on solutions and controls midway in the project, right? Because that's going to be premium payment. Because once you've assigned the contract, guess what the contractor is going to do? The contractor is going to charge you premium rates for whatever additional work that you're asking them to do. So that is why I don't like the change orders, and I suggest that you avoid them at all costs.
Will the slides be available with larger font to read requirements for contractors? I can answer this. If you email your individual regional security director, they could send you that individual slide. We're not posting the actual slides themselves, but the presentation will be posted in the next day or so. And you can also just stop it in that slide and take a snippet on your computer. But if you email your RSD, they could send you that particular information on that slide.
The beauty of YouTube recently is that you can actually zoom in on a video. Later on, when you're looking at that YouTube video, which is going to be fully available, right? You can, if you're looking at it, let's say, I believe definitely on Apple devices, you could zoom in. I believe on PCs as well. And you can zoom in into a video, into a certain sector of video if you're looking for it. So just a technical tip.
And I think this next question was kind of answered, but I'll read it again. Do you have success with vendors completing these forms, or do they say, forget about this?
It's a very good litmus test for vendors who are serious. If a vendor is really looking to get into your project, then they will abide by your rules. Just as long as you introduce them with the justification that you have to make sure that you follow your compliance rules. And later on, don't get in trouble with the granting agency, because if you haven't followed all the rules and you haven't had a proper bid process, then you may never get reimbursed, right? The point here is that the contractors are very well familiar with these forms, right? It's just in our particular community, we have been a bit behind the eight ball, if you will. We have not held the contractors responsible for filling those forms out, right? But I kid you not, I have done both the UN, I've done the Fitterman Hall in New York, the Borough of Manhattan Community College, I've done the Manhattan Family Court, I've done 15 Central Park West, I've done a ton of facilities. And if we did those projects without those forms, we would be laughed out of the room. It's a standard procedure.
Do we trust that the vendor knows the fire regulations?
Absolutely. If you insist on it and you put the onus on them, you have to trust them. I mean, at the end of the day, they are a licensed contractor. At least they have a business registration, right? If they're touching any electrical systems, they would have had to have been certified. There are certain compliance measures put in by your jurisdictions, by government authorities, that hold them accountable for this. You could certainly seek their certifications. They must carry the business license. They must carry additional certifications. Ask them. They have something to provide. That's great. I just don't know if it's available in all jurisdictions. That's all.
Our state contractor licenses and not on the SAM exclusion list, good qualifiers for contractors. And then just to add to that, if we use, so I could just answer that. You have to go by, if you're not from New York, you have to go by what your state administrative agency is directing you to do and how to get vendors. In New York, so this person's asking if we use New York State OGS contract, do we have to get 3 bids? So that kind of goes into, and jumps off that other question, because I don't know if you're familiar with the SAM exclusion list, but I don't think that applies in New York.
So I know OGS, and I can tell you that I've tried OGS and it didn't work out at all. The contractors that are listed on the OGS, unfortunately, are much bigger, and they don't want projects that are $50,000 or $150,000. They want projects that are $500,000 and higher. So there will be companies like Convergent, there will be companies like ADT, there will be companies like Securitas. None of them are interested, unfortunately, in smaller projects.
And what is OGS?
Means OGS is Office of. I'm gonna have to look that up. I apologize. So maybe somebody can Google it, but it's basically a government procurement system. That's basically what it comes down to.
Does a project manager do these tasks, such as checking references, look at workmanship, etc.?
Yes.
Okay. Also, is a certification and membership of an association of specialists good qualifiers for contractors?
Yes and no. So the yes part is if there are core competencies and qualification requirements and recurring testing that those associations perform on the contractors so that they validate their competency and credibility, right? Then yes. But if they simply got certified 5 years ago and haven't requalified or whatever, right? It's like you buy a car, right? But you never take it to a mechanic, right? What do you think is going to happen? Same with these things. Associations, unfortunately, dispense a lot of certifications for money because they get paid for them, right? They dispense them very easily and never recertify, right? So yeah, I'm going to show you my certification is valid, but I know nothing about how I got qualified in the first place, right? So it's the same as taking a one-time test, right? You take a professional test, you've only taken it once in your lifetime. If I retest you a year from then without prep, would you be able to pass it, right? So you make your decisions, and that's why I always talk about due diligence. Right? If I say I'm certified, would you trust me if I just said that? Or would you go and check my credentials in the association that has issued them? And if that association does not really care about recertification, then sorry, you got certified some time ago. It's just a piece of paper.
How do you want to handle change management in general? Do we need to address this in the RFP as well?
It's a term that I would recommend you not use with contractors. They're not that sophisticated.
And this jumps right off of that question. I thought that many change orders are requested because there are things in the walls, etc., that people cannot anticipate, so it makes the job more costly.
Agree, but that's what the walkthroughs are for. If you're able to demonstrate to them what your site looks like, if contractors are afforded sufficient time to walk around and you point your fingers in different directions and you say, yeah, for this I may have drawings, but for that I don't. So make sure you take good photos and you keep repeating, I don't want change orders. You own the system that you're going to give me or whatever solution you're going to provide to me, right? So that they understand. And then in your contract, right, you also stipulate that don't assume anything. You've had the opportunity to come to our site. So only when it's really something that you as the client have failed to demonstrate to the contractor, or you're asking for something in addition to the scope that was already approved, then a change order is justified. Now, keep in mind, I'm saying no change orders. There are some change orders that are completely valid, right? You just need to do your due diligence to verify whether the request can be validated. So it's not like they're completely banned from projects. There are some needs that are useful and important to make change orders for. But the reason why I'm making such a blanket statement is that you should get into a habit to basically tell contractors that we don't want any. So do your homework before you bid, do your homework before you start the project, and do your homework while you do the project. Please don't bother us with change orders. If there is one that absolutely necessary, we will need a very good justification for it.
If none of the three vendors give you exactly what you want, can you go back to them with your feedback and ask them to resubmit?
Absolutely. That's what the best and final round is for. In matter of fact, I'm doing the best and final round for a facility now. Okay, so they've already done the best and final, and we still found mistakes. So we go back to them because the client is, again, the community in New York, unfortunately, among us, right? We are stuck with vendors that, they need to be coached in many ways on how to do formal steps, to get the proposals over and so on. And so they miss things. They, sometimes don't coordinate the way they need to. So I'm helping a client do yet a third round of review of proposals. Luckily, the client has sufficient time, so they're not in a hurry. So they want to make sure that they get quality proposals so that we have cleared all of the issues that we anticipated and identify before we award the contract. So you absolutely can do that.
And I went back to a vendor 3 times already with a current contract.
Yeah.
And I said, listen, I need more specification on X, Y, and Z. I need specs on what type of windows, this happens to be windows, are being installed with their specifications. And then there was window film involved too. What are the specifications on the window film? If they're not giving you what you want, you need to ask the questions and get that information. And the more you have in writing prior to accepting a contract and signing off, the better you'll be going forward down the road.
Here, and that's another reason to give contractors a little bit more than you otherwise would. Okay, so I typically don't even start with a 1 week requirement for a bid submission. I typically give them 2 weeks. That's a very good test. If I have given you an industry standard time to provide a proposal to me, and if the proposal comes back after 2 weeks when you've had ample time to do your homework and it still looks terrible, I don't know if I want to work with you. So, I could give you feedback once, right? But I'm already kind of having my reservations about further work with your company. Okay. So again, that's a very useful exercise. Give them a little bit more time. Let them come back to you. If the proposal looks terrible, give them feedback once. If the next proposal comes back and it's not good, decline. Just tell them we're going to work with somebody else. Thank you very much. However, the benefit is that you have already met the requirements of the third proposal. So one of the proposals is easy to decline. If they don't stand up to the quality, the credibility, whatever, no problem. Thank you very much. Next time.
Is a statement and then a question. Cost plus percentage contracts, CPPC, are forbidden for NSGP projects. Should we mention the type of contract we require in the RFP? I haven't heard of that.
So is that a comment?
Comment and question.
I cannot find it. Basically, if it's not allowed, it's not allowed. So I want to save you time, so we don't need to discuss it.
Just remember, and this is everybody, the more complicated you make this, will be more difficult to get bids. At the end of the day, you want to get bids and you want to have information in that everybody's going to understand. So check with your local requirements, as Ilya mentioned, but you don't have to put more information in there than what you're actually looking for to get. You don't want to scare people away either. Maybe not so much the NSGP, but when you're dealing with a $50,000 state grant, it becomes a little bit difficult. And as Ilya said, a lot of these larger companies that might be very familiar with these types of terms, they won't want to bid on it for $50,000. So you're dealing with smaller institutions, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't get what you want and shouldn't have documentation, but don't make it more complicated than it needs to be.
And I want to give a quick shout out to David Kondrup for having deciphered for us what OGS is, New York State Office of General Services. David, my kindest thanks.
How do you reconcile the need to protect your facilities with requirements to post an announcement and seeking bids? Seems everyone who sees RFP and or visits the facilities will have specific info on existing vulnerabilities. When you submit your ad, you're not putting any identifiable information about your institution, and the state actually gives you the sample verbiage to use. A nonprofit institution in Queens, in Brooklyn, whatever it is seeking security-related enhancements, specifically for doors, windows, access control, what it might be. And then we recommend, and the state recommends, using a generic email, something that's not specific to your institutions. What that does is you get the initial response from people. It gives you the ability to vet that company, make sure they're a legitimate institution before you send them the RFP. So keep that in mind. You shouldn't be putting in particular specific information about your institution in your ads. And yes, could someone come there and be nefarious? Potentially, but do your due diligence before and check out that institution online, their footprint, if they are listed in the New York State database and so on and so forth, Better Business Bureau, and you can limit any type of potential exposure that you might have.
Another thing, if you haven't heard, if you have a lawyer on your board or if you know of any lawyers, there's a non-disclosure agreement that you can have and confidentiality agreements that you can sign. Those are standard industry practices. If you feel like you want to do that, be my guest. And you can include that NDA or confidentiality agreement together with your RFP. And it must be returned. Or even before you send the RFP, actually, you can say, no, please sign my NDA, and then I'll send you the RFP. So it's a fairly easy practice. And all contractors understand what NDAs and confidentiality agreements are.
And I got my proposals for my fencing scope, and I see I can't possibly have enough funds to fence the entire perimeter of my property. My thoughts are right now to continue with the high quality metal picket fencing and wait for next grant opportunity to continue the project. But this investment doesn't contribute to the security of our site at all, as long as it isn't our entire perimeter. Is that something I need to be concerned about? Do you think Dishes will give me a hard time with it? How do you suggest I ask them the question?
We've run into these issues not just with fencing, and I typically advise clients that, sometimes you have to reduce the extent of the security solutions you're buying and then chunk it out with future grants, right? Fencing is a little bit tricky because obviously if you put fence and it doesn't cover the entire perimeter of the property, then obviously you'll see a gaping void where there is no fence. I would suggest to, first of all, do a careful analysis on why you need that fence in the first place, okay? And how useful will that be? I would also recommend that you may want to speak with one of your regional security manager and just double check why that fencing is needed. Then you could also try to curtail the fencing to specific areas of your site. All of the fence implementations are fit for purpose, right? If you're simply trying to prevent pedestrians from accessing your grounds, fine, I understand. But could you then maybe focus on areas where the grounds are being used by large groups of people, right? Perhaps most of your grounds are barren. There's no activity takes place there, right? So perhaps you could limit the extent of fencing to specific zones. Now, once you've done that, if you start a certain piece of the fence at the perimeter, you could always modify and then continue once you get more grants. However, you should also talk to the fencing contractor if you are in the middle of the bid, or fencing manufacturers, which I always recommend if you don't want to violate NSGP rules about procurement. You want to talk to manufacturers and not contractors. And so manufacturer can help you address how that fence could be installed, with what budget, and also to what extent. And then once you've done that homework, you can go back and talk to Dishes about it. But my first recommendation is go back and speak with your regional security manager. Discuss what is the purpose of the fence. We can also take a look at the extent of it. We could take a look at compare with past projects and the budgets that we're familiar with, and then maybe give you some additional options.
Where do we find webinars about door access systems, etc.? Are they posted on the CSI website?
Correct. Yes, they are. They are probably, you're going to find them in 21-22 season. Okay. It's our first year when we started delivering these webinars. We had a webinar where it was Dom and myself who presented on door hardware. And then we invited Carol Resina and Sarah Brannock, who are probably the best door hardware consultants in the United States who are completely independent. Okay. There are consultants who work for large door hardware companies. Okay. And they love delivering webinars, but they're also selling their product. Carol and Sarah are completely independent and they do projects that are phenomenal. Okay. Their knowledge is amazing. So you have both yours truly presenting, and then you have even more solid expert that we were able to source for your education.
Federal reps are asking state reps for door specifications and removal installation info, as well as pictures of proposed doors as they review EHP. I've asked the state rep how we are to do this when New York State forbids from contacting vendors before the contract and EHP are approved and finalized. Their answer is temples usually know what they want to get, and they should be able to get the specs. Any comments on it and experience with this?
First and foremost, we haven't released it widely, but we do have a set of specs for doors. Okay, that's number one. And they're performance specs. They don't lead you to a specific manufacturer. I highly recommend that you change your mindset a little bit. Vendors are just resellers of doors and various other security components, right? What you should do is you should talk to companies that fabricate, meaning manufacture doors. And there are plenty of those. And if you're seeking for those resources, CSI already has them. So if you talk to a manufacturer, it's much better than talking to a vendor. Okay, because they want to talk about the value of their product. They want to tell you all the particulars. And if you need a spec, guess who's going to give it to you? The manufacturer. Guess where the vendor goes to get you a spec? They will go to the manufacturer anyway. Please just change your mindset and think more in terms of seeking these types of details from manufacturers.
And keeping with that, from experience with contract door installations on an NSGP myself, on the EHP, you're showing where the installations are going to be. You shouldn't have to provide removal installation and installation information there. You're showing the locations of where these doors are to replace, where the cameras are being placed, where windows are being replaced, and so on with your pictures. So you shouldn't have to, on your EHP, get into detail and looking for contract information. So when they say temples usually know what they want, you're giving the locations, this door to be replaced at this location.
The only caveat here, Seth, also and to everyone, is that if it's a historic site, that is possibly why you're being asked additional questions. Because if it's a landmark, then the people who are making decisions, they're also making decisions about preservation. That's one of the letters in the EHP, right? Preservation. And so they want to make sure that you don't replace a historic door with an aluminum storefront, okay? Because then you're degrading the look of the historic landmark, right? So that could possibly be the reason, but typically we don't see these questions being asked for facilities that are not historic landmarks. And even in the case of historic landmarks, EHP that just indicates which doors are being replaced is sufficient. I know personally of projects that are such historic landmarks, particularly in New York City and Manhattan, that are under complete control of the Historic Preservation Commission in New York. And yes, there was an architect involved in order to kind of provide more details and get approvals. If that's your situation, please reach out to a regional security manager and we'll give you more guidance.
So 2 more questions. This one goes back to, change orders. Sometimes you can't provide a price without clear access due to asbestos concerns, etc.
If asbestos is your concern, abatement probably will be a barrier to implementation of your project in the first place. Now, if asbestos is not, and you're referring to potentially some other issues, I can't say that access is required everywhere. Where the contractors sometimes struggle is that if you cannot demonstrate to them where your current cabling is, let's say it runs in the walls, and they can't physically open your wall and see where that cable runs, they might actually say, well, we're not going to touch it. If we can pull it out to just throw it away, fine. But then we're going to have to run new cables. So that increases the cost, right? You shouldn't worry that access into completely enclosed spaces is not provided. Contractors already, if they're competent enough, they should know how certain designs are done. In New York City, even smaller firms, they know how electrical systems are run because they all follow code, right? They know how fire systems are run because they all follow code, right? To them, it shouldn't be a big concern. If they start asking you questions, right, you should definitely give them a caveat and put the onus on them, not keep that onus on yourself.
Okay, and the last question. To have to get a specific number of bids, does it have to be 3?
Has to be 3, and no less than.
Okay, that's pretty simple. And Ilya, I'll let you close it out, and maybe you want to do a teaser for the 21st?
The teaser is going to be very simple. We are determining the topic at this point because we are also hearing, obviously, from yourselves. And a lot of people have reached out outside of these webinars, and they've asked a bunch of different questions. So we want to tailor the next session to that. We know there have been a lot of questions about MWBE. So a lot of folks want to understand a little bit more about what's happening with that and how that works and what are the challenges. There are challenges, I'm sad to say. We might choose that as a topic. There might be also some other topics that are specifically driven by your questions and needs, okay? So that's the best teaser I can offer. I'm grateful that so many of you have tuned in and that you've, again, given us your very valuable time. Please don't forget that a lot of pretty much all this content is going to be on our website, right? If at any point you feel like you want to go back and just review something, I urge you to do so, okay? That's how you can engage with this content at your own convenience. If you haven't taken good notes, so what? That's fine. All of this is recorded. You can go back and review. If questions arise, the team that we constantly try to promote to you is the team of regional security managers. Okay, they are your conduits to a ton of very, very useful information, right? To this day, I speak with facilities who have never heard of CSI. And I'm like, how is it possible that in New York in this day and age, you want grants and you haven't talked to JCRC? How is it possible, right? It's a treasure trove of information. Now, obviously, somebody has to take the time to engage with us. We appreciate it when it's possible. So please stay in touch.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. Have a good day.